Ches. The Rebbe is speaking over here that there is the idea before the mitzvah. The idea before the mitzvah is the idea sheyesh malakah, without any additional descriptions. This is done Eibishter, and this Eibishter we have to obey what he says, and the Eibishter is the absolute being, but there's no taich in was haste, was far metzias is das. Then there's the mitzvah is that a person should have a idea in the shleimus of Elokus. And according to Rabbanel, the shleim, the mitzvah is to know the shleimus of Elokus, the way seichel is mechayiv, the shleimus that the Elokus contains. And with the Rebbe's mevar, within shleimus, the etzem of Elokus, the atzmus of Elokus, b'chal b'shteitish, and the whole musik of shleimus. The Eibush himself is just, there's only him himself. There's no additional gather, no additional tire, no tire, not yet tire. There's just the Eibush himself, whatever he wants. And then there is Oliver Tzayneh that he should also contain within himself, that it should be a Metzias Shlema. And within Shleimus itself, there's two daggers. There's Shleimus al B'Seichel, B'Seichel is Mechayiv, the Tachas and the Musig, the Tachas of Shleimus, the B'Seichel is Mechayiv. Which Reifin Klali, the Tachas of Shleimus, the B'Seichel is Mechayiv is that he is fully independent, Tu'en Yisarach L'Metzias L'Zolase, V'chomash L'Zolase Yisarach L'Metzias Eilav. And then there's the Shleimus, was is Hecher von Seichel. The Eibush is Ein Sof, Ein Sof. Leis Mashal Tfisabeh. That's also a concept of Ili and Shleimus, but a Shleimus which is higher than Gidra Seichel. And the Rebbe's the uft over here is that's not only that the Eibishter is not the word is not just that the Shleimus shall be Seichel is mitzumtzum, and the Eibishter Shleimus is far beyond tzimtzum. The word is that he's b'chana muchrich in the Shleimus shall be Seichel. The whole Gedra Seichel, the Eibishter created Gedra Seichel, and the Eibishter created Seichel in such a way that what's considered ultimate Shleimus of Elokus shall be Seichel, that he's a mitzias. The komash is Zolasi tzarich mitzias Eilav, who is tzarich Zolasi. That's the Eibishter b'shaf. We can't b'shaf and beifenacher. And so the Eibishter himself is not muchrich in this shleimus. We seichel is mechayiv the shleimus of Elokus. The Eibishter himself is not muchrich in this shleimus. But it can sein that mitzias zolase any tzarich, even it could be a mitzias mitzad Eibishter himself that komash zolase ain't tzarich mitzias eilav. And al derech said the fact that who ain't tzarich mitzias zolase. That's all the way it is al piseichel. And the Rebbe brings in the art. I mean, the Rebbe brings it comes out when you get to all the inyanim of Elokus, when you get to all the inyanim of Shleimus. So there is two dargas. I feel I'm read the inyan of Ili and Shleimus that the Elokus contains. There's two dargas. There's the Shleimus al Piseichel. The Rebbe explains the dugman yidiyah. There's a mile that the Eibush has a yidiyah. So there's the musik of yidiyah. The way yidiyah is al Piseichel. Al Piseichel, the musik of yidiyah is that you know a fact. So the fact comes before the yidiyah. You know this mitzias, this happening. So the happening comes before the yidiyah. Masha'ik, the idea, the way there's Lamayla Ben HaSeichel, so B'chal doesn't have those G'darim. And there the Eibush has Yedea mitzad atzmei, not mitzad the fact that there's a fact, but he is a Yedea. And that's the Ein Zach. And that's so when you get to all Mailas, when you get to all Shleimus, and you have both of these, there's the Shleimus the way it is in Ein Sof, higher than prior to Gidra HaSeichel, and then there's the way the Shleimus of Elokus is, the way it is mitzad HaSeichel. And Oliver saying that the Eibush is not defined by anything. So Oliver saying, what's his ratzin? His ratzin is that he should be about shleimus the way it is shleimaylam and mitzadat which is shleimaylam and aseichel, and Oliver saying that he should also contain within himself. He should also be a shalim al piseichel. So it's also dinamit. It's not. The Rebbe is not minimizing the inyan of shleimus al piseichel of piseichel. We're saying fakir. Since the etzem v'lokus is not defined by anything, so what's the truth? The truth is what he wants. That's what he is, or that's the way things are by etzem. So Oliver Tzayneh of this Eibush, which is Ein Sof B'Tachlis, higher than saying the concept of Ein Sof, that he should be a Shalim, Shleimus B'Chana, Shleimus built him with the Shleimus of Ein Sof, and that he should also, that the Shleimus should be Mitztamtzim, he should also be a Shleimus Al Piseichel. That's the Nukudah that the Rebbe spoke till now. Just one word, ich weiß nicht, what this, the Rebbe brings over here in the Ha'ara 15, it's an important word to mention, that there brings a machlekes Rishonim if there's no musik of nimnois, the gabi the Eibishter. The Rashba says that there's no musik of nimnois. You see, reichev and bulti reichev, two afachim b'vasachas, pila v'kuba d'machta. So the pila v'kuba d'machta, the Rashba says the Eibishter is and the Rebbe is mavayra here. The fact that a davar gadol is a stirit a davar cotton, that's apiseichel. And there's in apiseichel it's mechuyev azim. You can't go to mitayr zayin beifenacher. But that's apiseichel. The Eibishter created gidra seichel. And if he created it, of course, it's not defined and it's not limited by the gdarim of seichel. But the Rebbe brings in Ha'ara 15, that all the birds saying that the Eibush was mitzamtzim himself, to also be a shalim. The Eibush created Gidra HaSeichel, and not only created Gidra HaSeichel as an external thing, but all the birds saying that he should contain within himself the Shleimus al Piseichel, soll sein Shalom und Azamis Teifen. So Piseichel kann verstehen, the Shittas Rishain, the Chikri Yisrael which hold that there is a Musik of Nemnois the Gabi Elokus. So they reden wegen der zweite Darge. Kavanas Milaberis Bar Krisha Tzimtzum Atzim Megidra Seichel. So the Rebbe says this. It's not that the Rebbe is saying because we come to Sifri Chikri Yisrael. That's not a raya that Apichsidis is nicht. According to what the Rebbe is mavir here, that the whole Musik of Gidra Seichel is because all the birds need to also contain within himself the shleimus of Gidra Seichel. So only the shleimus of Gidra Seichel, but not an Indian of nimnois, not an Indian of being mugbal in Gidra Seichel. So even the way when you say the Eibush was mitzamsim himself, we shalom Gidra Seichel, that doesn't mean that mitzad that tzimtzum is taka defined by the Gdarim of Seichel. The reason, the kavana is that you should be mitzvah Gidra Seichel is mitzad the mile which exists in Gidra Seichel. So there's not necessarily mitzumtzum if all the bertzene to be in Gidra Seichel stamazik is there's a kavana there should be limited in Gidra Seichel yamel is gerech. But the vart is all the bertzene to also contain within himself the shleimus of Gidra Seichel. So those the shleimus of the aspect of shleimus which exists in Gidra Seichel. In them Zakna the Eibush also contains within himself the shleimus of Gidra Seichel. Not necessarily all the hagbalas that come mitzadze. I mean what the Rebbe brings here that it's not that the kavan of these farim is that there's the Beis Krish Tzimtzum Sasser Megidra Seichel. But the truth is that according to Yechidus is Mavar, that Tzimtzum Megidra Seichel is that it should be a Shalom Megidra Seichel, but not necessarily that brings within itself an in of Agbala Gabi Elokus. This is okay. Das ist mir geht zu dem. Lass mir gehen ein bisschen weiter. We're holding order 23, no? Nicht das? Yeah, but the Matzedek speaks Mrs. Hamanus Holocaust. In was besteht the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem? So he brings the kasha of the Bahag, the kasha of the Rebbe Chizdei Krash Kashan Er Hashem. It's not shy to say a mitzvah that there is a mitzvah, because if you're accepting the mitzvah of mitzvah, you automatically know that there's a mitzvah. It's kind of so then the Barbanel Navar that was besteht the mitzvah that a person should understand, should know that the Eibishter Tachla Shleimus HaMitzias. And it was b'shtei tavos limus hamitzias that the Eibishter is hu in his arach mitzias l'salas. So the Matzedek is chelik on the Barbanel. That's in fact that the mitzvah b'shtei in knowing pratim in the ili of Elokus, that the Matzedek is masking the Barbanel. The idea that's machaya that there is a mitzvah, so that's the idea called that there's an Eibishter. The mitzvah demands of a person to know the Eibishter is ili, the Eibishter is perfection, his greatness, his shleimus. But what type of shleimus is the mitzvah that we have to understand? So according to Rabbi Nelson Shleimus al Piseichel, Abdemi the Masadek Chelik. So Masadek says since al Piseichel can Seichel is mechayed that the Eibush is an independent mitzvah, is who in Yitzarach mitzvah zolasi, and Seichel is mechayed the Komash zolasi a musik of emes al Piseichel, a mitzvah amitis, a mitzvah which is a mechuyev a mitzvah. Al Piseichel is mechayed the Komash zolasi Yitzarach mitzvah b'mitzvah eila. So if Seichel is mechayed that way, is nishayches kemitzvah of them. A person abardas. So if a person has Seichel, so he can't come to another maskam. A mitzvah of an Eibishter, a mechuyev a mitzvah, something which didn't get his existence from somewhere. Something which his mitzvah is as a muzayin, his mitzvah is mechuyev. So a piseichel, it's machai, it's machriach that he is fully independent, doesn't lack anything. Everything stems from within himself, and everything outside of him is dependent on him. That's a piseichel. That's seichel is machayev that a mitzvah is mechuyev, a mitzvah amitis contains within himself this shleimus. So it's a mitzvah then. The same way you say you can't have a mitzvah that say a person's eyes are open. You should a mitzvah that you should see what your eyes see. Your eyes see it. What's the shayla? So if someone's brain is functioning, can seichos mechayev that twenty tzarich mitzvahs lost the komash lost the tzarich mitzvahs. So what's the tzivah? The tzivah is something mitzad atzma you wouldn't necessarily be that way. The tzivah commands you in order to be kach. But if the mitzvah is adam, the mitzvah is seichos mitzad atzma is mechayev that way. Me can gar nicht verstehen anders. If there's an Eibishter which is a mechuyev mitzvahs, muzdach zan apiseichel that a mechuyev mitzvahs is that he's fully independent. So what's shaykha mitzvah? So Matzedek is chelik on the Barbanel legabi was b'shteit the mitzvah. What's the mitzvah according to the Matzedek? So Matzedek's mitzvah is that a person should know and understand. A person should know that the Eibishter is not defined. He's far greater than Seichel. It doesn't say that he doesn't have the qualities of Seichel. That nisht in them b'shteit the ultimate shleimus of Elokus. The shleimus of the Eibishter's ilu is ein sof. L'mayla from was Seichel can begreifen the musik, the concept of shleimus. That means they say the Eibishter is emes, the Eibishter is a mechuyev. There's the way Seichel understands the concept of mechuyev mitzvahs, and there's the chiyev mitzvahs the way it is higher than gedera Seichel. But Seichel versteht nicht. There is noch shot fisebe. And then versteht the mitzvah to verstehen that the Eibishter himself is far beyond the concept of the way Seichel understands the way the mitzvahs of Elokus is. So, the mitzvah Muna who she is Baruch Haram the niskav l'mayla madregas hachacham. And hemshich inin shamash mishmefarish kemedas HaRambam. That's what Matzah Zot Azim Mefurish. So the shaila is vu das the Rambam Rambam. It's mainly the pshat of the Barbanel. So the Rebbe brought before that it's merumas and lashon Rambam. The Shloime must have biseichel that the Barbanel says that's merumas in the Rambam that the dem b'shtei the mitzvahs. The Rambam doesn't just say leida sheyesh malaka. Leida sheyesh matzah rishon. Matzah rishon means a mechuyev hamitzvahs. And whom mamtzi called him to, that means that he's not in need of anything. He brought everything else into being. That means that he's not lacking anything. No one say compliments him. And then the Rambam adds, that the Rambam is a second prat, that any nimtza, anything which only exists, that is dependent on him. So the Shloime was apisechel that the Rabbanel zet in the Rambam. The Tzaddik says in was besteht the mitzvah, and he touches us in the Rambam, the mitzvah besteht in them is verstehen that the Eibush is not defined by sechel. Shalei be'eret mitzvah of sechel. Wo zet him das in the Rambam? Which means that with the Rambam, even a Pepaj without touching the Rebbe, the who in Israel is Selassie. The Rambam says that the Eibush is a mechuyev hamitzvahs which brought everything else into being. Wo liegt on the lashon Rambam? The Eibush is not defined. Is his ilui shalei be'erech to what Seichel understands the ultimate ilui v'lukus. So here have shalfash with das HaRambam should say munu shuram v'niskov. Because the Rebbe says that this prat was the reason why the Rambam brings Husha Novi, Husha Teira, it's in a separate halacha. It's not so. One prat is that you have to bring for everything. You have to bring a raya. So the fact that the Eibush who is the Eibush is a mitzvah samitis volunteer zakta. What's the concept of emes? Of course, the Eibush is he has to be. That's not the discussion. We're talking about the concept of mechuyev al piseichel. So that concept of mechuyev al piseichel, which means that he's fully independent and everything's dependent on him. This concept, these inyanim. So that's al piseichel. A verse zakta the Eibush is the shmuchim gedra seichel. That brings a dugma in the pnim. That the Indian of Yishma'ayin is not mechayiv the guy with the Eibush that the mitzvah should be totally in him. And Al Derez is going to get to everything. Every concept of seichel, elukus is not mechayiv. And we all have to bring in a raya of them. That al pitayda all about saying it to be a shalim in those musagim. So why is I'm saying in a separate halacha? Is I wants to be meram is that's a chilik of the halacha to know that whatever you understand and anything you speak about the Eibush, you have to bring a raya from Torah. Seichel is not a man the Omar when you're speaking about what type of mitzvah elukus is, what type of shleimus elukus contains. So the Rambam is meram is it the fact that Rambam brings in a separate halacha. The from a raya is from a novi, a raya from Torah. So here the Rambam is being meram is that the mitzvah b'shteitin. That's a chilik of the mitzvah. That seichel is not a man the Omar. The only way to know anything, when they get to the shleimus of elukus, I'm read that filu zachen which seichel is mechayiv that the Eibush contains as asar shleimus. But the Rambam for lots of chishtav seichel. Valteira zaktazi. That's a chilik of the halacha. So here you have the prat zeba mitzvah shuram v'niskov case of Rambam halacha beis halacha beis is the remes of who einim matzah. So now, so l'chura the Rambam Gedav Zagen does the erste Zach. If the truth is that the Eibush misadatzmei, Shleimus misadatzmei, meredach the Eibush is not defined by Shleimus. But even when we speak about the concept of Shleimus, some Tzaddik is not speaking about Atzmus. Some Tzaddik is speaking about that the Shleimus of Elokus is a Shleimus which is beyond Seichel. Eretish in of Etzem that Etzem is b'chana mugder and Gedra Seichel. The Rebbe brings in the order before that some Tzaddik eretish wegen dem we saw that. In order 13, the Rebbe says according to some Tzaddik ret al so you know Zayim Mitzad Giluim. We saw order 13. So the Rebbe brings in the Pnim that the yediyah which comes before the mitzvah is higher than the yediyah which is mitzvah mitzvah. Because this is a yediyah in Atzmus, Meseged yediyah mitzvah mitzvah is a yediyah in Shleimus. So Avshin Pash Loshna Barbanel Shom, now there's the Loshna Tzemach Tzedek is mashma lehepech. That the yediyah before the mitzvah is a lower darga because you don't know anything. You don't know anything about it. You don't just know a general knowledge that there exists an Eibush there, but you don't know any details about what type of being is this. So mashma defakert that the munah shaleh ba'atziva not this is a munah shaleh f'netziva. So there's a yeshleimar zebin in agiluim. So the Tzemach read when they get the iluim the Tzemach read is their Indian that in the fact that a yid knows a lukus on a taich, and then that's a yediyah and etzem. Eretish being that he's speaking all the concept of a lukus. The lukus is about shalim, about shleimus, about ma'ila. And at them like the Tzemach there is the ma'ila before the mitzvah. You don't know at all any ma'ilas. You just know a vague general thing. That there's an Eibush there, and he's what he says we have to obey. You don't have any understanding of the greatness of this being. So you don't have any. You have a very vague knowledge of this being. So it's lower. You don't have any concept of his knowledge. And the mitzvah is first of all, of course, the person is going to understand the seichel mechayiv shleimus, and then there's the mitzvah is to know that he's ram v'nisk of the malam gedera seichel. So someone said the fact that ram v'nisk of the malam seichel that went out in of ilui v'shleimus. That the Eibush shleimus his his milas are shalei berach higher than how much seichel is able to be played. Seichel is gvul, and the Eibusher's eir is ein sa, tachlis ein sa. So Seder Dach doesn't speak about that. The Eibusher is not muchrich in that he doesn't need the milas of seichel. The ganze Sache reichlich. But upon him, that's so the Rebbe brings here. So the Ramad gedacht only bin azay. The Ramad gedacht only bin the mitzvah seri shena leda that there's an Eibusher, and he is undefined. And whatever, and Torah says that he's an emes. But what's hebt on the Rambam with seichel? Masha bas chos in the case of Rambam leide shesha matzir rishon chulu. Afsh ikri mitzvah zamun lafi biras amatzedek ushoram beniskav chulu. This is still, we're not getting yet to what the Rebbe attaches here. According to the Samal Tzedek, in Basba state the mitzvah, I said, I'm going to say the question right. According to the Samal Tzedek, the fact that the Eibush has a shalom al piseichel, that's a given. The mitzvah state in them is of verstehen that he's milas shalei much higher than how much seichel grasps the ultimate shleimus of Elokus. Shalei ber, leis machshavet fisabi. Does that verstehen? The Eibush has tachas ein so far beyond what seichel is metayr the musig of shleimus and milah. So according to the Samal Tzedek, if that's what the Rambam, if that's the mitzvah, the Rambam gedav sagen. The mitzvah is leidas that the Eibush is the Ram v'niskav l'mayla megedarachav. Nish das sagt. According to the Samal Tzedek, the fact the Eibush is a matzir rishon, that's is kendach zayin anders. If you know this Eibush, you know that this mechuyev mitzvahs, and you know that about everything it to be. So why does the Rambam bechal begin with leidas shesh matzir rishon? According to the Rambam, according to the Samal Tzedek. I'm learning this again in the Hemshech also. So Samal Tzedek, Masha was chos in the case where I'm leidas shesh matzir rishon chulu, af sheikri mitzvah zamun lafi biras Samal Tzedek shuram v'niskav chulu. Then sagt der Rebbe Shloime, kein mitzvah shgam inen der Ram v'niskav yibei the leida yidiyah sichlis. L'chein maktim HaRambam ha'inyan the leida shesh matzir rishon. The Rebbe sagt das word. You can tell someone that the Eibusher is not defined by seichel. Can you verstehen? If a person doesn't understand the if you don't have a hasaga in how high seichel understands the shleimus of Elokus, you have no understanding of what the yeker of seichel is. I'm not saying the yeker of seichel. The yeker of the shleimus of Elokus, which seichel is mechay the shleimus of Elokus. So the Eibush is not defined by seichel. You don't hear any hafla. Some tzedek Seder Dach a union of ili v'hafla. The Eibush is not defined by seichel. So someone said that you can't understand it. If you don't appreciate what seichel could understand, so there won't be any appreciation when you say that you can't understand. Someone says it's someone's going to say about it that the kids, no one understands what he's saying. No one can understand the ultimate depth of what he's saying. If you don't appreciate the greatness of those people that don't understand him, so you're not going to hear any flow when you say that keiner can verstehen. Because there are a bunch of little kids and no one can understand it. First, you have to understand that these Tamid Chacham, grace Zer, grace Alam, and Legabe, your Darge, the Shalei Berach higher than your Mitzias. And Afal became Legabe, this going Godel, they have no Tfisa Smakam at all. Then you hear the Afla and the Ili of the godless of that person. If you don't appreciate Seichel altogether, Vestnish der Herr and der Ili, the Eibush is mushla from Gidrase. First, you have to understand that Seichel Nishkin Pashta Zah. Seichel is Mechayiv, that the Eibush is bleak vol. And there's Ribi Dargis in the Hasagas that Seichel has in the Milas Vaflos of Elokus. The more a person understands what Seichel is Mechayiv the Shlemas of Elokus, the more he's going to hear the Ili Vafla that Afal became, and the Eibush is beyond these Milas too. These Milas are nothing Legavim. So in order to appreciate Mizal Takadar Head, and not stamp to know the Eibush, it's not stamp Samaisa mitzvah, know that the Eibush that you can't understand. The mitzvah is to have Hargosh in the Eibush as a flow. To have a Hergish in that flow of Yili Velikus. To appreciate, to come to the recognition that whoever watches, to come to the recognition of that flow of Velikus, you have to appreciate Seichel. And then he appreciates, and Afal Bekain is garnished to Gabi Velikus. That was going to speak more properly about it in Sivches. So that's where the Rambam's Magdim. So Shloime is the Rambam Niskov. Does have an ich verstehen? The Rebbe is going to touch up what it means verstehen. I'm saying even with the Rebbe is going to touch up what the words Yidei Seichel. What I'm saying is before you want to appreciate the inner Eibush as mushla from Seichel. You have to appreciate what Seichel is. As you say a class, a kid in Cheder verstehen ist the godless of this going on. So that doesn't bring out any aflo of the going on. This class is maybe because this class is garnished. Because Seichel is garnished. Seichel is Ishkim. The Seichel is God agrees in Mitzvahs, and Seichel could be masig in Yodem Nefloim with the Shleimus of Elokus. But the Eibush is higher. So here you hear his Ili Vaflo. If you would stam as they say the Eibush can nicht verstehen, the hurt is the Eibush is Ili. But the hurt that Seichel is garnished. If you don't appreciate it. The mitzvah is to know the Eibishter's Ein Arech, his Ilui. In order to know the Eibishter's Ein Arech, you have to understand Vifel Seichel Versteht. And the Eibishter's greatness is Shalei Be'er higher than that. So then you der hair, not that Seichel is garnished. That is the Eibishter's Ilui Vaflo. You heard the meaning? So v'chein makdem HaRambam ha'inyin de leida she'eshem motzerish. כי דווקא לאחר ידיעה זו אפשר להגיע לידי ניילס יסר שהוא יסברך למעלה מגדר השכל. The Rebbe is teaching more than that. We're going to see in the Sifches. The Rebbe is saying that the mitzvah is, this is what we're going to teach. I'm just saying, Pashter and Musing in them. You see the Rebbe is going to teach up that the mitzvah is as being eifin of idea. We'll see that in the Sifches. Let me understand Sifches and we'll go back to Bar Tavir. Hamur mikol anal shamunis the idea Hashem there is Gimel in Yara. Which is a idea kololish yeshalaka. There's an Eibush there. Believe the economist the shum pratim without going into any say details. What's the definition of this type of being? Any say uptaich. What type of being is this? There's an Eibush there which he is absolute. Absolute is not the taich you have a tzir of the greatness of absolute. There's an Eibush there which saying that whatever he says goes and whatever he can do whatever he wants, but without having an understanding of what type of being this is, what's the nature of this being. That's the first idea. Then there is Beis Hayidea Mitzad HaTzivui, which is Yeshem Matzir Rishon Amtzikol Nimtza. That's a idea and the Eibush Shleimus Al Piseichel. And then there's the idea Nailas Yeser Shegam Hibachal Mitzvah. What's the idea? Shuhu Yisbarich is not defined by Gedra Seichel. And the uftov here is Gam Inyan Zev Eibush Hayidea Seichlis Leida. What's the idea Seichlis? What's the mitzvah? Man soll verstehen, dass Seichel Gufa jeder wie Yavin should never make it Baruch. Seichel soll verstehen as sein that he's a limited being, and his mitzias is not needed. It's not mechuyev. The Eibush hat das aufgemacht. Man soll das verstehen. You say to come to Hasage that Seichel, that the whole mitzias of Seichel and his way of looking at things is not innate. It's nicht das same muss sein. It's beschaffen geworden. And the ultimate truth is not defined by anything. That a person should understand that Seichel was created. That's nicht gepasht das sagen. Shekadish Baruch Hu eini mugder bechaz Hashem. The Eibush created it. The Eibush is not mugder. V'losh nachkira tachas hayidiyah Shalei Dach. The Pashtus and the Eibush says in the language, in the sprach of Chakira, not in the concept. The Teichen advarim Chakira is tachas hayidiyah Shalei Dach is that Seichel is mechayiv that ultimate shleimus, ultimate blikvol, you can't appreciate ultimate blikvol. There's different positions. We say Leini Da'acha. There is Leini Da'acha because a mitzias, which is an efshari mitzias, cannot appreciate the shleimus, which the Rabbi Benel says that who is Baruch Eni Sarach Mitzias L'Zolasi, Chomash L'Zolasi Sarach Mitzias Elav. The concept of a mechuyev mitzias, Seichel versteht that a nivra or a mitzias which is an efshari can't get to the ultimate of this pshittus of this ain't stuff. It's not when it tells the Leini Dach in Pashtus, Retzach is the Eibush is not mugder and gedera Seichel at all. He's not defined by Seichel altogether. Seichel comes to the recognition that Eibush is the ultimate shleimus, and the ultimate shleimus is that he's fully independent. To really understand and to really have a tzir, was he's fully independent, was he's the mitzias amitis, Seichel allein versteht, and you can't get to the end of it. You can't get to the ultimate clarity of what's the pshat mitzias amitis. Because since Seichel itself, or the person is an avshari amitzias, and a amitis, a mechuyev amitzias is blikvol, so Seichel can never get to the end of what amitis of a mechuyev amitzias is. But the Rebbe is saying, using the language of Chakir. The Tachas idea is, verstehen, as Seichel is beschaffen geworden. The mitzvah is that you should understand that any hasagas of Seichel is gvul, it's akbala. And if it's akbala, it doesn't define him. It doesn't define the Eibush. So this comes, once a person has the idea Rishayin, a person knows that there's an Eibush. And the Eibush is beyond the taich. Then whatever you learn, whatever you understand, the mitzvah is to notice or to understand that whatever you understand has a limit. It has a definition. And if it has a definition, it's created, it's not him. But what I'm saying is, if a person doesn't understand Bechlal, the Shleimus of Elokus HaPeseichel. See, a PMS we're saying, you speak about who in Yisrael from Sirius L'Zolasi. The Eibush doesn't lack anything. So it's Blikvul. In Pashtus, without being misbeinen, we don't see Hagbol in that Muslim. We say the Eibush is darf zu keinem nicht ankommen. He's ultimate Shleimus. He's a Mechuyev HaMetzias. What's felt in them? Where's their Agbal in that concept? See, the Pash, that's Blikvul. See, that's not Blikvul, because you're saying a certain description about him. You're saying that he's a Sholim. And the word Shleimus Gufa is Agbal. Who said there's the concept of Shleimus? That's already You say, so Seichel come to the recognition that even when he speaks about the musik of ultimate Shleimos and Blikvo, it's not a midas of Blikvo, but there's a certain touch. But so the Hakara, that Takas idea is that this Shleimos that he understands is Mugbo. But does that for verstehen? If a person is not misbein in Yanav Alakus, the way it is, Mechuyev al Seichel, so, and he stam says the Eibusher is Ein Sof. What concept of Ein Sof that he has in his brain when he says the Eibusher is not understood? He has no concept at all. The Eibusher is not understood. So, say this Maisa, I don't know where the muck of this Maisa is. It was Sayyid was I don't know if he says because with this, but talking about Sipur that once there's a Sayyid that was living in a shtetl, as a primitive Yid, and he lived in his little shtetl, and he has his little farm and his little area around him, and he never ever traveled away from his daldams. And the next generation, 2 generations, Chasna got somewhere a very far place. So the first time, after many years, this person had to travel to go to his son's chasana. So he's traveling, he goes with the train, he's traveling miles and miles. Russia is massive, and he's traveling and he sees Aratzis and he's asking the Das Alts belongs to Nikolai. He says, yeah, Alts belongs to, he's traveling more and he sees Mamish Meredik acres of land and vasters. He says, Das Alts belongs to Nikolai. So he started having sfekas in the moon. So what's the pshat? When he was in his little village, so he's mitzayir to himself. There's the little barn. This is mine. I own this barn. Then he was mitzayir to himself how big Russia is, and that belongs to Nikolai. And then there's the world. He was mitzayir to himself how big the world is. Asach Gresser. And that David, the whole world belongs to David. Then when he started traveling, so what he thought the world was much smaller than the Russia that he. Sein Welt was gemeint, so da Shalei Berach smaller than Russia that he saw. So maybe he's having speakers in the moon. Gemeint the Rebbe says Balabas from Azav Welt. Mitamo on Nikolai is a much bigger Balabas than the Rebbe. The ganz Jerusalem like them. So the concept is a person you say if you don't have any understanding of the Shleimus of the, you don't appreciate the Shleimus, you have no concept in your head of the Shleimus of Holocaust. Al Piseichel. So you say the Rebbe says he's not defined by Seichel. What's herst to? What concept do you have in a person's mind? The Eivish is blikvol. The minute he's going to hear mitamov et hernep hesber, the Eivish has tachas hashlemus. That he wasn't mitzayir to himself tachas hashlemus. And he's thinking the Eivish is not defined by seichel. Seichel behem meant his havana dort of a blood gemara, whatever his havana is. And that Eivish is not defined by seichel. He had in his hotishke musik from shlemus haseichel. So that when he's being shelo seichel, that shlil is garnished. It's a herzach dort nicht kein Indian. It's not an idea, it's herzach nicht any Indian of Ili and Shleimus of Alakus. A person is bein in the Shleimus of Seichel, and he comes to the recognition that Afal became, this is also Akbal. Ultimate Shleimus is also a definition. The definition, it's created. And then there's higher Elohim of Seichel. There's a higher, deeper concept of what Seichel explains Shleimus. The person has to understand that also and come to the recognition that even that is Agdar. And that's already, so then his Seichel comes to the recognition as Seichel is garnished. That from fear the hen as Seichel is Azar. That Seichel is and Afal became the guy with the Eivish Charling, it is garnished. Has to be also the way of Yiddish Sifis. And this in the Pnim, the Rebbe here just says that the mitzvah is to understand the way the Rebbe is mitzvah in the Pnim is that there's 2 dargahs. The first, the person should understand the Eivish Shleimus al Seichel, and then he should come to the recognition that it's Gvul. And if it's Gvul or it's an Indian, whatever it is, it's some description. So the Eivish himself, it's created, and the Eivish himself is beyond it. But the Rebbe touches it up in the Ha'ara. Why do you have to have the Akdama of the Seichel before? He says, Mashal Cholik is around the Sheshem Matzadishin. Yeshtemmer Kemitzvi Shikamin in the Ram the Niska wie Befen the Leda. We soll verstehen der Ili Vafla. You should understand the Hafla of Elikus, the Ili of Elikus. How you can understand the Ili? If you appreciate Seichel, and Afal again he's not that, verstehst du, herrst du in Seichel an Ili. But if you don't understand the godless of Seichel, what Seichel understands Shleimus of Elikus, so the herrst nicht in deinem Meach kein Shem Ili va'afla nicht. The mitzvah is that you should understand, your mind should understand the Eibusher's godless. That's only after your mind understands what Shleimus of Seichel is. And Afal Bekain is nicht das. So dort herrst du in Seichel Afla of Elikus. But if Seichel means nothing to you, so when you're saying that he's not that, herrst the garnished. You don't hear the Eibusher's Afla in your Seichel. The Eivish is not that, because Seichel is a kliniket. Not because the Eivish is grace. The Seichel is a kliniket. And the more you understand the Mailas HaSeichel, the more herrst du that Afal became the Eivish is not mugdar in the Menetes Bashaf. brings in this two stars. Ki idea is a shlila, but after the idea is a chiyuv. That's the word. I mean, what's the idea is a shlila? It said, however, the chiyuv is a mere gazah, and afal became he's beyond that. The chomash chiyuv and ayli is rafla the shlila is chiyuv zeh who afla and ayli is. Now the Rebbe is not saying that in the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe is saying it in of ili of the understanding the Shleimo Shalamalim Yasir. Here the Rebbe is saying, I feel that this Indian that Atzmos is not defined by anything. That also has to be an Eifin of Yediyah Sichos. When the Rebbe is saying here the Yediyah Nailas Yasir is not like the Tzemach Tzedek. It's a weiter different.
Why is it
Tzemach Tzedek is saying a person should understand the Eibusher Shleimus is beyond safe. A person should understand that also that Shleimus is garnished. Vaseba State is garnished, and Seichel is an Nivra. And anything that Seichel understands, appreciates is nothing. And even the concept of Shleimus is garnished. Not necessarily in it of Ili Vafla. The Rebbe touches up in Furish. What the Rebbe is touching over here is a Yid has the idea, it's a totally different Tzemach Tzedek, but what the Rebbe is touching over here is the idea Shlifnei mitzvah Hadra idea in Atzmos. They're not that for learning and verstehen. The Eibusher himself, does the Eibusher himself unattached. Once you have that notion, so to speak, so the more you understand, and the more this is a taich. You got this. If this is a taich, episode is hakvul. It does nicht them. So what's being made by you? The idea sheyesh malaka was hotish kin taich does herzach by the seichel through the shlila. It's not the shleim. It's more than someone said.
where are you getting?
The Rebbe says we'll see the. I'm getting it because I learned the Hadran once, so that's Medzen innovating with Zen. But you understand that Tzemach Tzedek is reddish dominion. Yeah, that's clear. Tzemach Tzedek red in the Lashon Chizis there's Maamar Kolamed with Eibusher's Mulubish and Kalim, so to speak. There is Shleimo Shalamalim Aseichel that is Ein Sof higher than Kalim, Ein Sof, and then there's Atzmos which is B'chana Begeder Ili. Tzemach Tzedek reddish then the Etzem of Elokus which is not Begeder Ili altogether. Tzemach Tzedek got out within Shleimus of Elokus Abaseichel Malim Aseichel. Avdem Zok the Rebbe Eichel. The Shlilas in order that as the Rebbe brings over here. Shlila is not going to have chiyuv. That's a minion. If you wanted to hear the Eibusher's hafla, that is beyond the definitions, so the more you understand the greatness of definitions, you appreciate the fact that Avavikin is beyond this definition. And that gives you a certain hakara in his iliv hafla. What's going to give a person hakara in the Echveis and Ragashavar's guidance? That even Tamid Chachamim Niflaim, is Gresser Farzeh. So that brings out that he's in a totally different caliber than them. So that gives you an appreciation of him, of the Shleimus Bligvul. But the Rebbe is saying it in the Pnim, even like Gabi, the Indian of Etzem. We'll see in the Amazon. See where do we see that. There was not the Rebbe weiter though. Even this idea, versteht, that Seichel is a Bashafen Zach, and if it's created, it doesn't define him. What's the Rebbe being masber? If the third darga is all within the concept of Shleimus, so vad it's shame. It's shame because the idea clause is in Etzem, and this idea is in Gilui. The Rebbe Zakner says it. The way the Rebbe touches the third darga is more than someone Tzedek himself says it. Third darga is a person understand that Seichel was created. What's the Eibusher himself? Whatever he is. Not a higher Shleimus. There's the Eibusher himself. So the Rebbe is saying, so this idea is a Zelbi idea from the idea Freer. The idea Klal is not Eibusher Anataich. What's Seichel's Machayev and Mekanim Taich? The whole concept of giving a Taich and looking for a description is Seichel. Even when you're saying Shleimus Shalamalim as Seichel, but it's a certain Seichel appreciates a something which is Shleimus. It's an Ilui which is Ein Sof. But it's an Ilui, it's a Maila. Seichel has no way of being Mitzayer this Maila. At Kedekach that it's Alderech Ha'emar Chacham Ramav Amukah that you can't hold it with your hands. But he has no tfisin in Seichel Kalam, but it's an Indian of Ilui. Here the Rebbe is saying, so there is some Yachas to Seichel mitzad Indian of Ilui. Here the Rebbe is saying Seichel of Verstehen as there is Bashafin Gebar. Wie grei Seichel soll sein. However high Seichel goes, you should as a Verstehen Sof Kol Sof, wie grei is as Bashafin Gebar. And the Eibusher is not defined by him. In the Mutbrich has Shalom. It says Sha'ava Bikein Gam Yediazu is different from the idea close. Why is it different? Not because this is in Giluim and this is Zetz. There was like the zweite word. Sheyesh Shabbat Meid Lefnei Kiyam Mitzvah. Where's the Rebbe Taich? Why is it different? It says Ki Idea Anal Diala Das Shoeni Motzoi He Ba Mitzad Ideas V'Seichel Adam. Seichel Adam Gufi beim Shedias Ashlila. Mashigna Amuna Vidia Kol Shesh Lakar Yedias Zushva Adam he lemets at Gidre Vidias Adam. Ki mitzad zeh shehu yizbarich nimtze begile b'chol madam. There's another way. The idea clause comes from vanen veisayid as the Anibishter. That's not because it's charang. That's not a musig which stems from his brain, stems from his keiches. And this kenish coming from Zaysid. A person's keiches comes something that is a mus. That's a concept. Something which has no relation at all to a person's the das seichel. Yeshem alka anatayich. Das stammt schon seichel adam. Von wann stammt es? Because hamoyru bez galus. Because the etzem is nirgash everywhere. A yid has argosh in olukus. He senses the Eibishter. I'm saying wrong, but the Eibishter is nirgash in a yid. Hamoyru bez galus. So the atzmis of olukus is nirgash in a yid. Von dort stammt es as veses dan Eibishter. Man veser. Not because it's one way of knowing something. Because I would say the regular way a person. How does a person get to know about something? The concept existed earlier, and the concept exists, and your seichel became, say, a person sees something. How do you see it? Not because you have the ability to tap into this and this object. So a person has the ability, that's a little kid can't know about certain things that are beyond his tfisa. Why? He doesn't have the senses to tap into this type of reality. The person grows, so he's able to tap into concepts, he's able to tap into things. It's a bislach. But that's all yediyas that stem from a person's kayfas. Kol chush teifas mokshe. So a person has seichel, and whatever relates to seichel, you're able to register. What doesn't relate to seichel, which is beyond seichel, you can't register. From one of these I mentioned on Eibishter on a taich, that's not a seichel-dige concept. A seichel-dige concept, I'm not saying seichel, even what a kid knows about, is something which relates to his experience. Something that he can touch, something that he can see, something that he can feel, something that he can imagine. Azach on a taich, an Eibishter which has no taich, where does that come from? Which kayach does he have that gives him the possibility to tap into this type of existence? Which is not a type at all. There's no kayach. Wann stammt es? Because hamoyru bez galus. The Eibishter hurts by yeder. The Eibishter is nirgash. So it has nothing to do with his brain. It's the Eibishter is nirgash, and that Eibishter is beyond any description. So Vesas not Eibishter, because the etzem is nirgash in his nefesh. The Rebbe thought that the mitzvah is once you have this elokus which is nirgash by you, then whatever you understand, you come to recognition. This yediyah klolis is Meir in seichel also. Once you have this idea called Sheshem Alakah, so also to verstehst du that it's not the ultimate. There's a limit to it. Any Indian has a limit. So if we wouldn't have had the idea called Sheshem Alakah, we wouldn't have the hergish or the understanding that there's a limit in Seichel. So the Eibush just tells us Shleimus. We wouldn't have this concept that Shleimus is a taich, is a tayah. Memele it's Agbal, it's Agdor. It's Agdor. Tachas a Shleimus, it's not Agdor is this. A guy will never can't understand. They can't come to recognition that tachas adei shleimi dach. Why? It's because seichos mechad the Eibush is tachas hashleimus, tachas ablikvul. The fact that we're saying that blikvul is a tayar, that's because the yid has a hergish in the Eibush which is beyond any taich. And it's all not stam he has a hergish in a mufshatik way, and it's payal on his seichel that his seichel understands that this in that I understand has there's a mitzvah, there's a tzimtzum. It's not the ultimate. The fact that he's margish that it's not the ultimate is because Vasadah be'em behergish the idea called Sheshem Alakah. We'll see it. It's not, but this is what comes out from the Hemshech Hasifim over there. We'll see it more in Kamat Cholok in the Hadran. The Rebbe Shtaltavek, the ganze Sache is that there is the etzem, or the idea Sheshem Alakah, and the kavana is that this etzem does also cheren echet and keches adam. This third darga, the kavana is that the fact the idea sa'atzma shouldn't only be mitzvah the fact that there is no mitzvahs. Val der elukus herzach. The mitzvah should also come to the conclusion as Adan Eibishter. The seichel should understand as Adan Eibishter. So this hamar hu beis galus is pile that the person's seichel should come to recognition as out of the state has a limit, and it was created, and as Adan Eibishter which is not defined by me. It's not three separate things. These three dargis. The kavana is as a cher and the mar, so as a cher and atzmos. But the kavana is as a cher and atzmos not only because from his point of view, so to speak. It should also be from the person's point of view. His seichel should come to the awareness as Adan Eibishter, which is beyond understanding. So this yediyah shalifnet tzivah, the mitzvah is that this yediyah should also be mitzad your seichel v'das. Should also be mitzad your akar. That will see the klolos abinyan. You heard the Indian Bechlolos. So it's not exactly what the Rebbe brought before from the Tzemach Tzedek. That's a weiter word. In the order, the Rebbe is explaining, according to the Tzemach Tzedek, that's the Pshat in the Rambam. That's the... Oh, Lemmerzen Achamol, the Sif, just... Ki yidei anal yala das yehu enimot. So he ba mitzad yidiyas, from wann stammt es? He ba mitzad yidiyas v'seichel adam. Versteht, as also versteht, hat a teich. The Baal hat a teich, and the Eibusher himself, I'm saying two things. The fact that you feel that there's a taich, that it's Agbala, that's because we have a idea called Shesh Malaka. Anders, what's gehört that there's no Agbala in it? It's good. What's schlecht? And if it's a taich, b'meila darf es nicht sein. Any Hagdara doesn't have to be. Beila was created. So, Shevsech on the Guf of Eibusher idea is a shlila. Mashayk the motive idea called Shesh Malaka. Had the idea Zusha Adam Hilay mitzad Gidre Yidias v'Seichel Adam. Gam leik not seichel, but the way seichel understands that seichel has a gvul. That's seichel comes to recognition. He's shadel himself, that his mitzias is not ultimate. So that there's seichel that there's trying to grasp things within his gdarim, and there's a gedder in seichel is that he comes to recognition that he's limited. But that's all mitzad gidre is seichel adam. Kimash engel the idea which lifnat tzivi is mitzad zeh shehu is barchin tzivi gidre b'chol makom. Weil der Eibischte der Herzach, is beginnen. The eight Tere'er, HaMoire Bizgalis, v'lechein, there was Taich, I mean, in the Tere'er, it's very mamish, but the Rebbe is saying, it's not, you say, HaMoire Bizgalis, v'lechein Tenei Kesed. The Rebbe is touching here, Tenei Kesed, because the Eibischte is nirgish with it. Not because, you say, since it's open, the Mele, we grasp it. Since it's open, so he's nirgash. It's a whole different Indian. The Eibush is not limited, and the only way to feel him is if we have kelim to be teifasim. Is nirgash. Hamayr is galas. The Eilam heard the meaning. Third darga is that seichel itself comes to the conclusion that we have to say like the first darga, the first idea. Yeah. But it's that seichel comes to it. There is a kid, the basic on Eibishter. Then there's the seichel comes to recognition that my understanding is limited, and b'meila the Eibishter is not defined by it. He created it. What is he himself? I can't say anything about it. Seichel comes. I can't speak about it. No, it's the same idea. But the question is, from what aspect they're coming from? Is it the Metzias is mechayiv that way, or because the Eibishter is Meir? Lapel, the second idea,
Even the diagram that Marcel is talking about, Seichel can't say anything about. Seichel comes to the recognition that it's limited.
Yeah, but it's an inyan of Ili. It's a shleimus. If it's a shleimus, it's not. So there is somewhat a relation to Seichel. Seichel is the Eibishter's. Seichel understands the Mechuyev Metzias is shleimus, ultimate greatness. We understand that the concept of greatness. How that relates to Lukus. Lukus is the most perfect being. Seichel can understand what's ultimate greatness. So there's greatness Ein Sof, greatness Blikvor. That's not legamri mushla from Gedera Seichel.
How do you say at the same time?
What I'm saying is, when you say mushla here, the mushla on that darga is that Seichel's too small. He's much bigger than that. He's Ein Sof. You have no way of understanding his Ein Sof. Let's not shatisbe. I'll put them fine. But his shleimus Ein Sof. And as we were saying, it's not about shleimus. Whatever he wants. He's not grand. He's not ultimate grandness. Ultimate Ein Sof. The Rebbe is saying a different knage. Because Seichel understands that he's limited, the het is b'shafing geworden. Eber is b'shafing geworden, hat nicht was zu reden b'chol. If you're created, so you have nothing to say. It's a different. Here, the Samasadik is saying not that Seichel is limited. And whatever he understands is not going to capture the ultimate thing. The ultimate thing is beyond that. Saying Seichel is limited, and therefore, it doesn't have to be to begin with. It was created. If it was created, so what's the Eibusher himself? Nothing. We can understand that Shleimus is a mile. It's not a... I'm just wondering, I mentioned this last time. I think so, that Bill said, I think, if I remember correctly, but this is not in the tapes, but I think that he said that the Rebbe said it by the Hadran, maybe someone was there, but But if I remember, the Rebbe said that the Shleimus Al Seichel is Shlilim Tzat Ketzer HaMasik. And the Shleimus Shalamalim HaSeichel, Ram V'Nisam, is Shleimus Tzat Emek HaMusik. And then Atzmus is the so you're saying there's Shlila because the Musik is beyond Tfisa. Shleimus Al Seichel, we know what we're looking for. Seichel has, you say, Seichel cannot, Seichel's Mechayev V'Kenish their gain. What Seichel itself is Mechayev. That the Shleimus of a Metzias Amitis cannot be fully grasped in Seichel. But we know why we can understand it. And we Seichel's Mechayev we can understand it. Then there's, you can understand it, it's not on your plane to begin with. Emek HaMusik. The in is from another world. It's not. Adar says that Ema Chacham Rambam Mugash Yev Shal Masha B'Yadai. It's another Indian B'chlal. But it's an Indian of Shleimus. It's an Indian of Ilui Ba'aflo, which is not Sheilo Seichel B'Tachlis. Mash'egun is Emek HaMusik. So there is some relation to a Musik, to an Indian. But it's Tachlis Emek. And then there's B'cham that connected to Emek. It's another Indian Gansi. So here the Rebbe starts going weiter how this Indian, these Yidiyas Hashem is the Ramah we learned in Hilchos Days, but the Ramah says Yidiyas Hashem, the Tachlis, the most important mitzvah is Yidiyas Hashem. And the Rebbe touches the Ramah, the whole Tachlis Kavana Sabriya is Eisgetouched and is seen begoli in the Gdorim with the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. So the Rebbe touches, we see in Yidiyas Hashem 3 in Yonim. So these 3 Yonim, that's the basic Yisod of the whole Torah mitzvahs. And Tachlis Kavana Sabriya. Let's get to Rebbe Maamar. K'moshe mitzvah Yidiyas Hashem, mitzvah Rishena, which is Rishena Gam B'Mayla. What does it mean Gam B'Mayla? So this mitzvah represents the general Kavana. What's the Kavana Sabriya? So al derech zeh b'cholos ha-mitzvahs. Sheyesh b'hem dugmas gimel inyan ha-mitzvah. And the kudah ha'ikes ha-mitzvah su shem ritzeinei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu ritzeinei zbar shel Malik ha-michach mos. We say, the Alter says in Look at the Torah, Ilim stavino lach tevetz. See, you say there's a mitzvah with after legging tefillin. In was besteht is there any Indian in putting on tefillin? Is there any mile in putting on tefillin? The same way said Elikus is not connected to milas and shleimus. The whole concept of milas and shleimus was created is Oliver Tzayne. There's Zazan in from shleimus. Was it the Eibishter Alein? There's only him. Al derech a mitzvah is the Eibishter's ratzon. Anzulegen kein shum zach nicht. The Eibishter's ratzon. That's what it is. Is it a great thing? Is it an ultimate thing to do a mitzvah? That's nicht in dem besteht what the mahus of a mitzvah is. It's the Maamar, which is beyond any taich. There's who is barich and ervil. And you see, a mitzvah is look not because this is the ultimate greatest thing in the world, but we can't describe the ultimate greatest. We say that a mitzvah is higher than understanding. A mitzvah is not about a great thing. A mitzvah is kach oliver tzeni shalayatz. That's the tzeni ha'atzmi shalakadosh baruch. Hecher nicht in the sense hecher that it's beyond. It's the Eibishter himself and his ratzon. Ankin shum davar neisa. That's the first thing. So tzeni shalakadosh baruch. Tzeni zbar shal malik amichach masei. He says, "El sha'afat b'kein ratz HaKadosh Baruch Hu sha'ratz in the mitzvahs yum shagam b'seichel." Punkt is, if the Rebbe says, "Negeta lukus b'chlal," the musik of lukus b'chlal. The Eibishter mitzadatz is the Eibishter himself. He's not defined. He's not defined to anything. Oliver Tzeni that so the Rebbe is touching Oliver Tzeni as erzol echet zayin in seichel. Oliver Tzeni that he should also be a shalim in gidra seichel. What's the matara of that ratzon? As seichel zal ech der gain to memes. We'll see that. So Oliver Tzeni that's the ratzon of mitzvahs zal echet zayin in seichel. That they should also be in yanim of if a seichel is miyak. That api seichel they should be dvarim shleim. Api seichel they should be in yanim chashuv. I'm going to skip this next line, but then where's the? Let me see the vizu. Okay, it says where's this brackets end? 1 second. We say the vizu. Okay, let's see. So we say we got so you should come say all time mitzvahs. We say them so even we speak not them to get the time mitzvahs. There's the reasons for the mitzvahs. That means that the mitzvahs are also every mitzvah is a metzias shleima al piseichel. A yid lake tefillin is mishabed alev hameach and it brings in perfection on all levels. So even the mitzvahs gufa means the ratzon of the Eibishter also came through the medium of seichel. Gam mitzvahs gufa nit the Torah, which what is Torah chachma. Chachma is barich. So chachma is a certain the Eibishter is connected the union of chachma v'lukus. So where is the shleimus of union of chachma? Where is chachma is barich bezgalus? That's dafke in Torah Shabbat Peh. Torah Shabbat Peh, the only way to result their gain to the understanding the Ratzon Elyon is through Shaka V'Tari. The main Shaka V'Tari is in Torah Shabbat Peh. Torah Shabbat Ksav is more the Kriya and the Ksiva more the Elokus which is Monich in the Asis itself, not in of Seichel V'Asag. The in of Seichel V'Asag is Torah Shabbat Peh. And within that Gufa, Torah Shabbat Peh, you have Allah Chal Sinai, which is also given over through Talmud Larab, through memory. You have to hold it in your memory because it's connected to Seichel. But Varman Amad Al Pishesh Esri Midas, She'evin Al Limad Al B'Shak V'Tari. V'Ach Shayach was a plukta, Chachma V'Seichel. So the mitzvahs go through element of Chachma V'Seichel. But La'achre Shak V'Tari Shebachol Sugya, what's the maskana? The Allah and the Psak Din, wie will der Eibishter? There is the way to mizal their gain to the Eibishter's Ratzon, wie mizal Tzukum into them is through Shak V'Tari of Seichel. So it's not a coincidence. Through Shak V'Tari, the kavanah al yena is that the fact that Seder Ratzon, that should be the maskana saseichel. It begins to begin with is Eibishter's Ratzon, Seder Ratzon Ali. Then this Ratzon is nimshach in seichel. And what's the kavanah that Ratzon is nimshach in seichel? That seichel should also come to the conclusion that seichel is not Amanda Omer. That the truth is the Eibishter's Ratzon. That's the kavanah. The kavanah is that the mitzias from his point should also come to recognition as Seder Eibishter, as Seder Ratzon. And seichel and the Indian is not seichel. But seichel, in the first idea, lechatchila nishtak in seichel. The etzem is Meir. The kavanah is that the mitzvah sa'adim should come to that recognition. So the way the Seder Advaran, the way mitzvahs is given to Yidden is that there's on one hand there's lechatchila, there's the Ratzon Elyon. It was the slab shechachma v'seichel, and the only way to get to Ratzon Elyon is through learning, through Shak V'Tari, seichel atayra. But what's the conclusion of seichel atayra? Mizal wissen what the Eibishter will. We should know what the psak, what the Allah is. What's that b'pnimi senyonim? That the kavanah is that seichel all their gain. That what's negeh is Ratzon Elyon. But it's going to say the kamis mitzvah. Should gidder saying is bar shalmalim chachmas. Shalachene kram alach b'shem kisser shalter. Liyesem gidder saying is bar shalmalim chachmas. The dugmas kesser v'atar shalmalim eretz. Pashas you understand that this midrash ater that's only a medium. It's only a medium. How did the Eibishter he invested his ratzon in the Eisei Satayra? And the only way to figure out his ratzon is through using midrash ater judgment. How else are we going to know all these biyurim? Why the Eibishter didn't write everything in Torah Shabbat? Why did it have to be a system of Torah Shabbat? And that we should have to derive the Eibishter's ratzon, the halacha through seichel. Why can the Eibishter? It's different biyurim in Rishonim, because if you write it down, then it would be also be a seis svarim in ketz. Anything that be written down, you can have a couple of interpretations. Different biyurim. Why the mitzvahs had to be in a way of Torah Shabbat. But the Rebbe's Maamar, it's not stam and chitzanistic reasons. And the only way to know the Eibishter's ratzon, you have no other brera, only through his gil mish haTorah and through a person understanding the way the Torah works. It's because in them bashtet kavanas, that's the whole kavanas sabriya. There's the ratzon elyon, and which is higher than any pirushim, higher than any taichin. But the kavanah is that seichel should come to the conclusion that he has to be misbattle to the ratzon. That for learning and verstehen. But what should be the maskana of his learning and understanding? That at the end of the day, what's important is what the Eibishter wants. And the whole matar of his seichel is, the Rebbe brings an halacha. What's the whole matar of the limud? You should figure out what the Eibishter wants. But we're not being but according to this beer, seichel is not just a technical tool. How are we going to find out the Eibishter's ratzon? The kavanah is that should be the maskana of limud. The maskana of limud should be that it's only worth it if we get through this to Ratzon Elyon. That's the reading. Not that it's a technical. That's the kavanah sabriya. The kavanah sabriya is that seichos of ashtein amadav sich übergeben zum Ratzon. They should go out of himself. Now, commercial mitzvahs atzmon, the way the mitzvahs are given out, there's a gamekima mitzvah shalom. There is an kudar rishenet tzarich lisa the fnei kima mitzvahs, which is kabbalah samach shamayim, kabbalah mitzvahs. So what's the pshat kabbalah samach shamayim? So done. What's the Eibishter haste? B'dugmas ha'amuna v'yidia klol shesh el kash lefnei kima mitzvahs dias Hashem. The Rebbe speaks Meida Ani in the morning. Ayid Vesa Asadan Eibishter, without, beyond any taich, and a Gitza Chiber without any chishbainis. He's the Eibishter's Eved. Not up Yiseichel. But the head, the Eibishter's Machos, that was a Chavegem for him. And then La'achir Agdom Azu, L'Peh B'chtei Leida Samaisa Sheyasin, Ayid can, the Rebbe is saying there's no way that a person could ignore his Seichel. See, in it before, Chachmei Yisrael have to use their Seichel. So a regular Yid, what does he have to bring in his Metzias? It's Neshaychas Andish. The Yisayid is that there's an Eibishter, and you created to serve him. That's the Yisayid. But then you say, I'll do what he wants. Why is a person has to use, in order to know what to do, you have to use your brain. But what's the purpose of using your brain? That Saf Kasaf, you should, in order to know what he wants from you. Which is dugmas idea, means you have to understand and appreciate. There has to be the mitzvah sod. Dugmas inin yala ladas shu eni matz. Sav kol sav, the kavana is ton the mitzvah lepayel. The limud is leida samasha sheyas, and for that I have to learn and verstehen. But what's the matar of the limud and apidin? That the nature of Talmud is that it's meivel demais. A yid learns Shulchan Aruch that gives him that pushes him to want to do. Why is that? Because that's the whole matar of the mitzvahs of seichel. The whole matar of seichel is lo verstehen am davs chavegem if I but also like a verstehen. We'll see one in a minute, but y'all learned this is in Ha'ara 26. Al derech zeh b'chol derech when you get the mitzvahs, side avodah of kiyum mitzvahs, side avodah of mitzvahs. The Rambam. And Rambam is negeya the way halachis are given. So it's ratzon, seichel, and then you mevar the ratzon. There's al derech zeh when you get the kol sabriya. Ratzon the briya is elam mitzat atzmi beim in nisaf parashim oz al terbesei. What's the dik? What's the word taiv? Avataiv is talking kash. What's the Alter Rebbe of Taiv? Famous word. What's the Maamar? What's the Taiv is talking kash? Indian which has a taich, any darga which has a certain hagdara what the darga is. So Shaykh to say a question. Why did he want? You say Bligvul. What does Bligvul have from creating a world? What's the connection between Bligvul and creating a world? You have to give a beer, you have to give a teretz, you have to explain. Bligvul is going to gain that his Ein Sof is going to be expressed. The Alter Rebbe says like of a type, the in of his Hava So'ilim stems was the Eibush had a type. What's what the Eibush is Nisava? You can only ask questions if you're talking about an Inyan, which has a type. You can ask a question. How does he suit that? Like I ask this kind of any questions. A question is, it should have been otherwise. But no, like I ask there's no questions. What do you mean it should have been? Whatever he wants, that's the way it is. Now that is not explaining. Explaining means we don't understand the relation between Aleph and Beis. We're going to find the connection. We're going to answer you why the Eibush suits a world, why the world suits it. That you can't even ask questions. Why can't you ask questions? Because the Eibush is beyond the Eibush has no tzir. There is no definition. Whatever he wants, that's what it is. What's far shayla is for him. So that the Inna B'Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu is on a taich. But Lepel steht in Sfarim yet time a Bria said. So there is shleimusin which are expressed through Inna Bria. Shkal Hashem is kachesa. So that's because the Oliver is saying that the Indian of the Ratz and the Bria, the Nisave, should also be Nislavish and Seichel Vatam. But what's the Kavana? The Kavana is that through these timing, someone tzukum and Nisave. It says, "Aval Hamna Kavana betamim elu b'chdei shal yodem tushlam Kavana der tachin dir latz musay." Here the Rebbe says Mamish is getaycht. The prim is not. The Rebbe says Mamish taises reis. What's the Kavana? The fact that Oliver is saying that the Sheminin of Seichel V'Asaga is that also Seichel V'Asaga is Zolder Gein Asdanet. Should be so. Also from the point of view of Mitzias, Zol Nirgar Zayin, the Hu Yisbarach, which is higher than Seichel V'Asaga. The in of Yizgad Shlemis Kechesav is that the timing should bring forth to the Kavan. That's nicht the Pasha. Das ist the Nekuda. The Elam is the Nekuda, yeah? Okay. Das ist the Nekuda. Okay, we'll be Mamshech b'Yom HaShlishi.